In this podcast episode, Carrie Prejean Boller speaks with Tucker Carlson about her experiences on the President's Religious Liberty Commission, the controversies she faced around her religious and political beliefs, and the broader conflicts involving Christian Zionism, religious liberty, and the escalating tensions surrounding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The discussion touches on themes of faith, censorship, political loyalty, anti-Semitism accusations, and the internal struggles within Christian leadership over these issues. Carrie Prejean Boller recounts her rise to public attention beginning in 2009 as Miss California when she openly stated during the Miss USA pageant that she believed marriage was between one man and one woman. This statement ignited controversy before the widespread rise of cancel culture, with many attacking and effectively canceling her, though a majority of Californians supported her views politically. Former President Donald Trump took notice of her courage and faithfulness to Christian principles, encouraging her publicly and fostering a friendship. Trump praised her it factor, highlighting her willingness to speak truth despite the personal cost. Despite pressure from pageant officials to apologize, Boller refused and doubled down on her faith convictions. Her stance cost her the Miss California title, but she remained steadfast, gaining prominence as a conservative figure defending her beliefs. Nearly 20 years after the pageant controversy, in April 2025, Boller was invited to join the President's Religious Liberty Commission shortly after converting to Catholicism. The commission, comprised of 12 members including prominent Christian leaders and figures like Bishop Robert Barron, Cardinal Timothy Dolan, Kelly Shackelford, and Paula White, was tasked with hearing testimonies from Americans facing religious persecution and advising on policies to protect religious freedom. Boller initially felt unqualified but recognized her unique position as someone who had personally experienced slander, cancellation, and loss due to her faith. She participated in monthly hearings in Washington, D.C., recommending witnesses, such as a boy forced to read transgender-themed material and a Navy SEAL who lost his pension for refusing a COVID vaccine, aiming to highlight real religious freedom struggles. Over the summer, after her appointment, Boller faced growing conflicts within the commission's leadership. She received a warning from a White House official, Mary Margaret Bush, who cautioned her about social media posts accusing her of anti-Semitism. This was tied to Boller's public statements criticizing Israel and highlighting Palestinian suffering in Gaza. Bush also instructed her not to speak about Zionism, equating criticism of it with denying the Jewish right to exist, a position Boller rejected, explaining her Catholic faith's theological distinction. Despite these warnings, Boller refused to censor her posts or ideology, pushing back against this infringement on her religious liberty. Boller believes the main forces behind her ostracization were Paula White, Trump's chosen pastor and a leading figure on the commission, and Dan Patrick, Lieutenant Governor of Texas and chairman of the commission. Both demanded that Boller cease publicly critiquing Israel or post content about Gaza without approval. Paula White, in particular, sought to control Boller's social media output, yet repeatedly ignored Boller's requests for help addressing human rights concerns in Israel, underscoring a lack of genuine interest in religious freedom. Dan Patrick told Boller bluntly that her role was not to protect religious liberty objectively, but to protect the president and his reputation, effectively making loyalty to a political agenda a precondition of participation. Repeated calls for Boller to resign, initially handled by White House personnel Mary Sproulls and Mary Margaret Bush, failed because Boller refused, insisting only the president could remove her. Boller found herself increasingly isolated as other commissioners did not defend her. She contacted multiple respected figures within the group, including Bishop Barron, Cardinal Dolan, Kelly Shackelford, and Ben Carlson, seeking support or clarity, but none publicly intervened. Many seemed intimidated or unwilling to confront the dominant narrative on the Israel issue. Boller felt like a lone voice defending genuine religious liberty for all, including Jews, Muslims, and Palestinians, in contrast to some commissioners who appeared willing to enforce conformity to a pro-Israel political line. She described the commission as disorganized and secretive, with selective acceptance of witnesses to hearings, rejecting Jewish anti-Zionists and Palestinian Christian voices that she proposed in an effort to ensure a balanced hearing on anti-Semitism. At the pivotal anti-Semitism hearing, Boller was deliberately excluded from preparatory materials and was unprepared to face a panel dominated by Zionist sympathizers. When testimonies began, she attempted to acknowledge legitimate anti-Semitism faced by Jewish Americans while asserting the right of Palestinians and others to protest Israeli policies without being labeled anti-Semites. The hearing quickly devolved into denials of Gaza genocide by witnesses and commissioners, contradicting the reality Boller described. She challenged the narrow definition of anti-Semitism being used to equate any criticism of Israel with hatred of Jews, invoking traditional Catholic theology and fulfillment theology as opposed to replacement theology, the latter being a mischaracterization often used against her. The hearing became hostile, with booing when she identified as Catholic and anti-Zionist, and acrimony from Chair Dan Patrick, who interrupted and tried to silence her. Despite this, she remained calm, respectful, and resolute in questioning the logic and fairness of the Commission's approach. Shortly after the hearing, Boller received a formal message from Dan Patrick informing her of her immediate removal from the Religious Liberty Commission without substantive explanation. Boller was dismayed, contending that only the president had the authority to remove her, and that Dan Patrick, as an equal commissioner, overstepped. This dismissal was perceived as retaliation for her refusal to comply with the enforced Zionist narrative and her open criticism. Following her removal, certain commission members, including Eric Metaxas, publicly attacked Boller, accusing her of anti-Semitism, resorting to name-calling and further vilification without any dialogue or attempt to understand her views. She remained defiant, emphasizing her role as protector of religious freedom for all faiths, standing against identity politics and political coercion within the Commission. The discussion highlights how Christian Zionism has become intertwined with American politics to such an extent that dissenting theological perspectives, such as Boller's Catholic fulfillment theology, are labeled heretical or anti-Semitic. Leaders like Paula White and Dan Patrick push the view that Christians must align politically with the modern Israeli state, regardless of moral concerns about its policies or actions, such as the ongoing tragedy in Gaza. The episode explores how this conflation of religious faith and political agenda undermines authentic religious liberty and coerces conformity under threat of defamation and removal from influential platforms. It also exposes the internal conflicts within American Christianity, where old doctrinal teachings clash with contemporary political realities imposed by powerful figures and administrations. Outside the Commission, Boller's stance has elicited strong support from various Catholic groups and individuals who appreciate her defense of traditional Christian teaching and religious liberty. Organizations like Catholics for Catholics extended her the Catholic Champion Award while inviting her to events as recognition of her courage and faithfulness. However, this support has also drawn backlash, with critics labeling Boller and similar figures as anti-Semites solely for their opposition to Zionist ideology tied to political Israel. Even some Catholic leaders and clergy, fearing association with controversy or personal backlash, avoid making public statements of support, leaving Boller to stand largely alone in facing the official commission's hostility. Both Tucker Carlson and Boller expressed disappointment and concern over the commission's leadership, accusing it of being driven more by politics and money than genuine religious liberty. They criticized the unwillingness of prominent commissioners to publicly defend the principles they are meant to uphold, highlighting a culture of fear and conformity. Boller openly questions the theological credentials of figures like Paula White, labeling her a heretic due to unorthodox teachings and behavior. The insistence from some commissioners that all Christians must accept support for the modern state of Israel or be labeled anti-Semites is framed as both unbiblical and an erosion of Christian doctrinal freedom. The podcast delves into how the enforcement of Christian Zionist politics within religious institutions and government bodies serves geopolitical objectives, including preparing public opinion and political will for potential wars involving Iran and Israel. Boller connects the Religious Freedom Commission's internal conflicts to larger global strategies that prioritize political loyalty over conscience and moral truth. The suppression of dissenting voices, accusations of anti-Semitism used to silence legitimate debate, and the sidelining of non-Zionist Jewish voices undermine democracy and religious liberty. The entanglement of politics, theology, and power leads to an environment where faith is co-opted and weaponized, threatening core American values and Christian witness. Despite the hostility, attacks, and isolation she has endured, Carrie Prejean Boller remains committed to standing by her Christian convictions. She describes the emotional toll, including crying to family and feeling anger at injustices, but also the strength she draws from her faith and support from genuine friends and some clergy. Her story highlights the contemporary challenge for believers who speak uncomfortable truths in a polarized political climate. Boller contends that the real essence of Christian faith includes enduring persecution and standing firm even when powerful leaders prefer silence or complicity. She also emphasizes unity with others facing censorship and vilification for upholding their religious beliefs in a pluralistic society.